I'm Marcia Meskimen, and I'm the Director of the Institute of Advanced Studies, and I'd like to welcome everyone today to this webinar. And let me give you a little bit of logistics about this webinar, which is that this is the keynote talk that is part of the private view and opening of Ambiguous Standards Institute, a traveling exhibition. And we are very much hoping that if some of you have tuned in from the Midlands campus of Loughborough University today, that we will follow this webinar and you will join us in person for the opening. And I've been told, I have it on good authority, I know we have some refreshments, and I've been told that there is a lure of some very nice red wine as well. So please do feel free though, if you'd like to join us after this talk. This talk today was intended initially to be a completely hybrid event with some in-person attendance and some people being able to Zoom in, but has moved to a Zoom only because Selçuk Artut, who is our IAS visiting fellow, who will be speaking today with Cansu Cürgen and Avşar Gürpinar as part of Ambiguous Standards Institute, has had a minor delay, only a delay in relation to the way in which the Home Office is currently processing visas, but will very soon be at Loughborough University with us, but we wanted to ensure that attendance could be kind of maintained. So we've moved to a Zoom format for this, but you are welcome in person after to the show. And what I'd also like to suggest is if you are interested in having some conversations once Selçuk arrives, there will be opportunities to do that. So please, let's make sure that the dialogues continue from today. And we are very happy to have effectively a three-person trialogue today as the opening keynote for this, where we are looking at the question of the third, as I understand it, manifestation of Ambiguous Standards Institute, which has been a project for some time, founded in 2014, and has moved in a number of different venues, including the Istanbul Biennial and so forth, and is now installed in the Martin Hall Gallery for a short period in its third manifestation, looking at Institute as praxis. And today, Ambiguous Standards Institute, a traveling exhibition, we will be able to hear from the founding members and Selçuk, who is joining us from all the way from Turkey, and is going to be in a completely different time zone, managing to have a very engaging notion of the traveling exhibition that Ambiguous Standards Institute is. So I'm going to turn over now, and please, if you have noticed already, there is a chat and there is also a Q&A on your screen in this webinar format. And please, if you do have any questions or anything you'd like to raise, put those into there as we are going along with the webinar, and we will look to have that conversation soon. Thank you. I'm turning over to you guys now.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for welcoming us to here in this webinar and to Loughborough. The stage is yours.
Yes. We are the Ambiguous Standards Institute. This institute was established in 2014, and it has started as a very informal practice of making a list of words that we think are ambiguous standards, ambiguous expressions of our quotidian life. Expressions like a tat, a V, in the blink of an eye. Later, we have tried to describe these words and visually and textually describe these words. And we collected all the explanations in a dictionary-like, a visual dictionary-like book called the Ambiguous Standards Institute. Later in 2016, we have transformed the structure to a more formal one, to a more institutional one. We wanted to establish a real institute, and this has resulted in 2018 in the first installation of the Ambiguous Standards Institute, looking at various issues of ambiguous standards, such as time and food and serving, and some of them we will talk about today. Mm-hmm. And some of the basic rules, fundamental rules of being an institution is to have institutions. So these mm-hmm. people you have seen are experts in various themes. Serenay is a measurement and labeling expert. Atakan is a visual communications manager. Cansu is the CEO. I'm the Secretary General. Selçuk is the appropriate technology virtuoso. So these people work together for each and every installation of the Ambiguous Standards Institute to create the physical manifestations of the ASI. All the issues, all the subjects and topics we were interested in were physically manifested in the fourth Istanbul Design Biennial in 2018. Borrowing some ideas from the Deutsche Werkbund, sorry, we have created these crates to include quotidian objects, everyday objects, to create discussion and debate. And we have exhibited these crates in the Istanbul Design Biennial in 2018. Later, this exhibition was traveling to France and Belgium and Jerusalem with some additional crates appearing as well. And eventually it made its way into a transatlantic institution called the Art Institute of Chicago, with the curatorship of Zoe Ryan and Maita Borjabat Lopez. The ASI has exhibited its extended crates with a central information center, a monolithic information center, and some agitprop posters on the wall, and in a total of 10 crates was in display in the Art Institute of Chicago. And this exhibition was called An Institute Within an Institute because our works drew some parallels to the collection of the Art Institute of Chicago. So this was 2021, where it was quite a turbulent year for the Institute, because two of its members and co-founders, me and Cansu, we have moved to the UK, and we have started to work at Loughborough University, and we, as our mission and vision statement previously stated, we want this exhibition, we want this institute to have a continuous practice. It shouldn't be just the exhibition, but it should be a continuous experience. So with the help and collaboration with the SDCA and LU Arts and Radar, we were able to open our first installation and exhibition in the Martin Hall here and today. So maybe we can go into the specifics of some of the crates which look at the ambiguous standards of different issues.
Yep. So here in this space in the Martin Hall, we are exhibiting 6 different crates. They all contain different discussions, and hopefully these discussions will extend interactive conversations with the visitors. Before we go into details about the crates content, maybe we can just summarize what we are investigating, because we said about the travels of the institute, the people of the institute, but what we are doing exactly. So to answer this question is not easy, as we are tackling with a large array of issues, particularly concerning the daily life issues and how design affects our daily lives, how design standards may, let this be the real standards, but also the lack of standards, and sometimes double standards, sometimes all the multiplicity of standards. These are affecting our daily lives, how we interact with objects, with people, and with the environment. So Ambiguous Standards Institute does this crates, see these crates just as conversation starters. So by no means they are showing us the total situation or the issues that we are tackling today, but they are just conversation starters for us to be maybe a little critical about the things that we consume, things that we conceptualize our design world.
And actually, the ASI fills this gap created by the international and transnational institutes of standardization. So on one hand, you have lots of different institutions like the Turkish Standards Institution, the ANSI, ISO, DIN, BSI. So all these institutions are looking at the absolute standards, superstructures, infrastructures of standardization. But there is no institute, there is no institution that looks at the ambiguous standards and seeing how ubiquitous they are, seeing how much we are affected by all of these ambiguous standards. There is a need for this type of an institution, but we should say we are not advocates of ambiguous standards, or we are not cursing the absolute standards. As Cansu have mentioned, there's a need for absolute or ambiguous standards on different sides of our daily lives. Yeah. We just want to provide a platform for these issues to be discussed.
Yeah. So let's start with the first crate that we are exhibiting now, which is the ambiguous standards of specification. So here in this crate, in the exhibition room, you will see a crate full of kitchen utensils. These are overwhelmingly specialized. For example, we have string bean peelers, or peelers of okra fingers, or objects for slicing eggs, etc. So these are very specific, actually hyper-specific objects. And in order for them to function properly, not just the object itself is being standardized and manufactured, but also these objects demand standardized products. Therefore, they demand standardized beans, standardized eggs to function properly. And what is more is that our drawers in the kitchens are fulfilled with their presence. So that means a lot of plastics in use. That means a lot of, maybe the water consumption is quite concernable when you use these specific objects once and then wash them up and then forget for a couple of months.
And for each one of them, you have to remember that you have a specific object designed for this task. So it's mostly is the case that if you want to, let's say, open a jar or slice an egg, you just do it with a knife. But actually, you have a specific egg slicer in your cupboard. You just don't remember that.
Yeah.
So in this crate, you don't only just observe the objects we have collected and curated in the crate, but you also see this video and you can see these objects in use and how they interact with the food they intend to process.
Yeah. All right. So the second crate that we are presenting now is the ambiguous standards of time. We are taking the concept of time rather seriously, and we are very much intrigued by how we are obsessed by measuring it to certain degrees of precision. But on the other hand, we use very vague and ambiguous expressions to express our relationship with time. And sometimes they are, I mean, in most of the times, they are very culturally coded, but it's not just about that. We can communicate through these culturally coded and loaded expressions that are talking about a specific portion of time. So here we have a LED screen on the lid of our crate, and inside the content of which is again a collection of daily life objects. How do we calculate time? I mean, if you look at these objects by asking this question, then you will see that all of these separate objects are very much related with this conceptualization. For example, in the middle of the crate, you can see a birth control pill, which is exactly the 1 month calendar, and it is working as a specific calendar, but also serves to a more general purpose, maybe. On the other hand, we have the egg timer or pasta timer, or the reminders of pills to be taken daily or weekly. What else we have? Maybe you can continue.
So the thing is, we have on one hand this almost fetishization of measuring and fragmenting and reminding of time.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, our personal, individual perception of time is entirely different. And we rely less and less on the real passing of time,
mm-hmm.
which is the Earth's travel around the sun
mm-hmm.
and around itself. So this passing of time through day and night, through seasons, is becoming less and less important as we rely much more on the exact mathematical
mm-hmm.
descriptions and fragmentations of time.
Yeah, obviously, all these crates are assembled and designed together with Selçuk Artut, and he will be providing more detailed info towards the end of this presentation.
Mm-hmm. About how we come to an appropriate technology
yes.
Inside every crate.
Yes. Another one that we are exhibiting now is the ambiguous standards of diagnosis. This is an important case for us, and we might say as well that it's still in progress. So this case is specifically dealing with how we define normal and the capacity of normalcy in terms of our healthcare systems, in terms of our diagnostic standards.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Here again, we rely maybe too much on the metrics and the measurements of these devices, whereas we have just read this news on a British newspaper where the blood sugar measurement devices might give you false reading mm-hmm. according to the color of the skin. Mm-hmm. So not only these devices can malfunction, but also the averagization, let's say, of all these measurements and mm-hmm. values according to a specific, mid-aged Western white male might create some problems mm-hmm. inside the mm-hmm. medicine sector.
Yeah, so obviously these standards are life-saving at some degree, but also they can be, I mean, this doesn't save them from being scrutinized and criticized in terms of their valid standardization methods. The other one is the ambiguous standards of travel. I think this is somewhat very much interesting for people in Midlands, in East Midlands, since we have a very close by airport that is mostly operated through chartered airlines. So these types of airlines have this very specific regulations in terms of your carry-on bags and their sizes and weights. So this is basically how we came up with this idea of ambiguous standards of travel. We were just talking about this carry-on bags and their regulations, and then after we start researching about the different sides that we are facing throughout the airline companies, we found that found out that there are more than 30 different size regulations for carry-on bags. So each airline company has a different size and also weight management for that. So this is very important for us to discuss at large, because it's not just about the size of the cases, but also the content of these cases. What is being regarded as safe and what is being discarded or needed to be taken out from the luggages. And the last two is, the first one is the tune, ambiguous standards of tune.
Yes.
And it is, maybe you can continue on that. Yeah.
This is a very, maybe one of the less abstract, more abstract crates that we have. In each crate, you have several objects, objects of everyday life. But at a certain point, actually, when we were designing the soundscape of the institute, the Ambiguous Standards Institute, we have realized that the sound, the music, the tunes have also has its own standards in every culture. And when we look at Turkish music, just some folk songs or classical melodies or pop songs from Turkey, we have realized that the underlying DNA, the main elements or components of composition has its own standards. So what we have done here is we abstracted these melodies into their essential sound.
Yeah.
So the green buttons you see here, when you press them, you hear that DNA of that specific air. And the red buttons are compositions that are derived from that DNA, from that basic, I cannot say melody, but from that component. So you can then see how the same DNA, the same basic element can yield to entirely different compositions. One can be a classical composition, one can be a pop song, or it can be a rock song.
Yeah. So the last one is the ambiguous standards of electricity. I'm sorry, there's still written as tune, but it is the ambiguous standards of electricity crate. So this is the most tackling one. And since we are a traveling institute, we had to face with this reality of different standards throughout the world. We first started our crates, these electrified crates, by using a European type of plug, and then for Istanbul, for Europe, and etc. And then we changed it into US standards, which is completely different, not just because of its plug type, but also the voltage system is different. And now finally we are here, and we switched to the G type, the imperial type of the electrical standards. So it's not easy, but I mean, beyond its practical, let's say, issues, there is something more. And here, for example, you are seeing in the middle of this crate, you are seeing the type I, which only eliminates Israel. And it is a specific type of plug, only valid throughout the world, only valid in Israel, Palestine. So this is a strange concept for us, because I mean, if you plug in the imperial type, the G type, you will see some glimpses of the history of Britain. Or if you plug in the A type, the US type, you will see how all the Latin America, for example, and other parts of the world, these remote islands are being eliminated. So I think it provides us a wider discussion about the effects of modernity, effects of colonialism in terms of bringing infrastructure to the other parts of the world.
Yes, exactly. And here maybe it's good to throw the ball to Selçuk, because all of this requires an appropriate technology. Our crates are, although sometimes entirely deviant of electrical circuits, Some of them have screens, some of them have LED screens, some of them have more intricate circuitry. The aim here is we see the crate as an interface to the user, but how do we provide this interface while not raising the standards of technology too high? Why don't we want to do this? Because we don't want these things to be too expensive or too inaccessible or unsustainable. So here Selçuk comes in and designs the interior, the inner organs or brains of our crate. Maybe Selçuk, you can talk about the electricity and tune crates and take us through the design phase process of these crates.
I'll be glad to. You can hear me well, right? Okay, cool. But before going into what happened behind the scenes, I'd like to pinpoint you to a strange coincidence, which I also have noted as like is there a Da Vinci Code or some sort? Because we as ASI, we did an exhibition in AIC, which is Art Institute of Chicago, and now we're hosted by IAS. So I think all these abbreviations are kind of like giving me a sort of like an ambiguity, or we shouldn't be confronted by this plethora of all these abbreviations which are coming into coincidence, or like, are we choosing institutions just because of their appropriate abbreviations? Anyway, so my name is Selçuk. I'm looking forward to be there and the meeting with you. But let me explain what's going on behind the scenes. Will be nice if you can go to the first, for instance, the sound, the music box we have. Yes. When you're looking at this box, everything seems so simple enough, so then people can touch the buttons and then hear things. Even, I mean, unconsciously, you can also you can try all sorts of different things, but you should be like guided with a sort of like an interface, which has been in discussion between me and Cansu and Avşar about how we can get people to interact with this system. Because we're exhibiting items. When you're exhibiting items, you are also confronting with the fact that people might kind of like have difficulty in touching things. Because there's a slight difference in between an art object or an artifact, a design object, but that ambiguity also is kind of like an item that we consider quite heavily in our discussions. So when we were building this, me being a professional musician, I really enjoyed doing this because I also have the issue of like trying to understand all these ambiguities between different musical rhythmic patterns. On the green buttons, when you press, so then you are triggering a rhythm, a basic rhythm made out of a synthesizer sounds, and on the right correspondence, which the three buttons are attached, you are hearing some examples of such rhythmic patterns. So hopefully people can go into the gallery and try this. Yes, that's the box that we're seeing in Cansu and Avşar's camera right now. All this simplicity had a serious complexity at the behind. Like this black box issue that we're seeing, like, I mean, watching a TV is a kind of like similar thing. When you're watching a TV, you never are bothered about the electronics going on, but I'm the one who's bothered with all the electronics happening. And when I started building this circuitry, I was almost half the way of it to finish. And then there was a sudden thing going on the globally, the Earth, which is the COVID issue. And it changed the whole design to a greater extent, and you can tell by the reason why. Because when we first started the design, we were aiming to let people touch the buttons and trigger the sounds. I think that was the first version we did in the Istanbul Design Biennale. where these buttons had no LEDs at all, because people were touching the buttons and then they don't need to like keep a record of which button they pressed. But then when we realized there's this COVID and we are not hygienically educated well, we thought to ourselves, when we're exhibiting these items in Chicago, people will never touch. And it will be, I mean, it will also be not nice to tell to people to touch. At the very first phase of this COVID, we were all shocked about it, you know, like people were hiding in their spaces, not even touching their knobs, doorknobs. Anyway, then I thought to myself, we should do an automatized version. And then the automatized version is behaving or mimicking as if there's a visitor and then touching the buttons, each one, and then moving through these different rhythmic patterns. And then, but there was a hope in us, because that was super unknown. When COVID arrived, we were not sure about when it will finish. Even the exhibition will be accomplished to be presented to the audiences. And then we put a switch in there, and we called it a COVID switch. And we thought to ourselves, we should have it start running automatic. And if there is a change in the world and then the COVID disappears, the guys over there in the museum should turn the switch to non-COVID situation, and people will be allowed to touch. That's not only about like putting a switch, but when you're not letting people to touch things, the interactivity, which is my research field and my specialty, becomes a serious task. Because, I mean, we all are facing with the same devices like the cell phones or smartphones. We touch everywhere. We touch buttons, we interact with the objects. And then when you're told not to, it's a bit like you feel like a naughty child, not being able to play with their toys. But there are solutions like we did in this case. With all these cables and gadgets hidden inside, people are able to play these tunes and melodies and then listen through different rhythmic structures. Hopefully you will enjoy it. And yeah, we can pass to the next one, the electricity.
Of course.
I'm guessing we presented this as Israel Design Biennale, right? First.
Yes, Jerusalem Design Week. Yes.
Jerusalem Design Week, yes, exactly. And there was no COVID at all. So people were allowed to touch, and so so they could plug the, I mean, they could let these plugs behave like buttons indeed. But the main difficulty when I was designing the electrical circuitry of this was to tackle this LED thing that you're looking in front of you, which might look so technologically weak in a sense. I mean, we could even put a LED like a touch surface or something like that in there, could serve to a certain degree of a purpose. And I would like to trigger this conversation and then provoke the audience to go and ask questions about why we choose such technologies. Why do we think they're more appropriate to our use? So there are, I don't know, something like 290 different countries all over the map. And I mean, these LEDs, they have a certain size so that you can't fit so many LEDs in one space. So while we were designing the whole thing, yes, as you can see over here, things got messier and messier. And when you have a mistake, it was becoming almost impossible to find any remedy to solve it. So we needed to be so certain about everything so that we indexed all the cables. I think this is the first version of it. Then I made a better one. I think this is the main, the second design of my main board. Another solution would be to have it, if you go to the next slide, like I also even did that, the circuit design, and send it to the factory. but I wasn't unsure about whether these circuit boards will be printed and will be sent to me back, because they are mainly produced in China. There was this COVID, and I mean, everything was becoming seriously difficult. And if you go to the previous slide, and I took it to my benefits. So during the COVID, when we had the lockdown, I had the leisure time of me producing all these cables. Like, it was kind of like a mediation for me, like spending a lot of time with doing something. I mean, when you're designing it at first, it's really difficult. Like, you have to put a lot of efforts in thinking, but then when you are done with the design, all you have to do is just a process, then you turn out to be a worker. And then I did all the procedures, and it was, as I said, quite a meditating time for me to all make these cables, each one of them one by one. And you can see, like, there's little painted colored numbers over there. Each one of them is indexed. And we certainly wouldn't like to be in any situation where these items are exhibited elsewhere and we won't have an access to be there. As of, like, in this moment, we're facing exactly the same thing. I'm over here in Istanbul, and the exhibited items are in Labra. And then if things go wrong, who else is going to fix this? It's impossible. So you have to be like 100% sure about the roughness of these luggages, because these will be carried here and there in different transportation means. So you have to be certain about whether all these mechanisms and electronics will function super fine. And that was, again, another challenging task for me. And yeah, this is, I think, more or less what was behind the scenes. And everything was programmed, like, in these circuitries, ICs, so that they should be plug and play. No like advanced guidance should be required. And I'm super glad to see that even I'm not there with you, unfortunately, Cansu and Avşar, you sorted out so nicely, and everything works quite well, huh? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much.
The whole installation took about
1 minute.
one day, like about a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And it was because we have designed the exhibition furniture as well. It was very easy to install, and it's almost like a plug-in exhibition, I might say. So we just plugged it in, and everything started to work.
So that's about it, I guess, from us.
Yes.
And thank you very much, Selçuk, for joining. And hopefully we'll see each other very soon. Thank you, everyone, for listening us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask now, or you can come in. If you are in Loughborough listening us from somewhere else, you can come in, and we'll be in the exhibition space. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.